Hey, Buru, hey, Boya, hey, Bucheche, everybody in Cyberland. Hey, it's your favorite Babalao. At least I hope so. Omodun, Odileke, coming at you with this fine video. Hey, Buru, but hey, more Boya, importantly, hey, Bucheche, everybody in Cyberland. But more importantly, this video, and I apologize, I think I had an echo there with my speakers on. But with this particular video, right? What I want to honestly tell each and every one of you is thank you, right? Subscribers, you notice that I'm putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that at the end of the day, I value you, right? Not because I value you more than anybody else, because it's not the case, but I know that you are investing in this. And because you are investing in this, I would like to kind of share with each and every one of you that your investments are used for a good cause. It's not just to line my pockets and pay the bills. No, there's a lot that is going through this, and I want to thank my goddaughter, right? So my goddaughter Keisha's pretty smart in these things, and she said, hey, you got this nonprofit and you need to kind of help navigate it, but you need to kind of follow some of these kind of, stepping stones in order for you to truly make that mark that you're looking for. And for me, that's very important because I feel that everybody should be entitled to Warriors and Hand of Ifá. Everybody needs to understand where they're destined to go, right? And I would tell you from my perspective, this is a reason why when I give Hand of Ifá, I give the Warriors, I give Hand of Ifá, I put you through a training regimen, I give you Teja de Egun, I give you paperwork, I give you study material. And that is something that I particularly do, right? And I do that for the sake of, you know, I believe that everyone under God's will needs to understand this. So this particular, right, this particular live, I understand wholeheartedly it is going to probably everybody because I assigned it that way. But I wanted to make sure that it's reinforcing other videos that I am doing within the subscription so that you have some insight on what I'm teaching during those subscriptions. Hopefully that makes sense. So with that said, Iburu Boy Abucheche family, hey, tonight we're gonna go deep, right? We're gonna go into the ocean, into the spirit, right? We're learning about Olokun, right? The Orisha of the deep abyss, right? The hidden wealth, right? Of mental and spiritual stability. A lot of times people go to receive Olokun and don't necessarily understand that one, Olokun is foundational for all practitioners of this faith. I promise you, and again, I've made this point valid many, many times over. Although I've been a practitioner of Ifá, and Ifá is Ifá, whether you're Isheshe, whether you're Lokumi, Ifá is Ifá, right? But nonetheless, in Lokumi lineage, right, in Isheshe lineage, there are some variations, some different lineages of the Ache that must be followed in order to truly be successful. And in the Lokumi faith, Olokun is your path to success. Olokun is foundational, very similar to a lot of other divinities, right? Like Orisha Oku, like Ochosi or Ode, you know, feeding the earth, understanding your egun through spiritual misas, all foundational things, right? So many people ask me, whether it's through email, whether it's through the chat, many people begin to ask, hey, why do some receive Olokun early? What is the role of Olokun in today's spiritual life? Some people ask, what happens if we neglect Olokun? So tonight we're going to answer that with Odum and with modern understanding, because I think this is where it makes the rubber meets the road. A lot of times we talk in parables in Ifá, and we talk about things that happened decades ago, right? We talk about things that happened 100 years ago. We talk about these patakis, but we don't truly know how to bring it together. right? So with that, I want to make sure that that's understood. All right, I see that we have quite a few people connected already. This is phenomenal. I'm excited about this. For my subscribers, you got access to the chat. That's one of the perks of being a subscriber. So definitely say a hello. Tell me where you're coming from. If you guys have access. If not, we're gonna push through. Okay, so here, if you're taking notes, which I hope you are when you're watching these videos, here's some oduns that I think is important for us to kind of analyze a little bit. All right, we want to talk about a yobe. We want to talk about obeyono, right? Which is obeogunda. We want to talk about irosongofun. We want to talk about ogunda owani. We want to talk about iwuri bobe, which is iwuri obe, right? Because these are going to be the oduns that we're going to focus on in order to better unravel who is Olokun, right? So Shama, Shama, Shaman '05 line, Bendiciones from the Brick City. Bro, Newark. I'm from North Newark. Shama, I don't know if you know this, but that's my stomping ground. I was born in St. James Hospital, which is probably not even there anymore, right? Down neck. And then I grew up in Second Avenue and Prosper, right? And I grew up in Prince Street. We jumped around a little bit, you know what I mean? We didn't have money out there, you know how it is. But no, good to see you on there, my friend. All right. Then let's begin. Olokun. What do we know about Olokun other than Olokun is the Orisha of the abyss? But when we talk about Olokun, it's almost as if we visualize this thing that's living underneath the ocean and it's there at our beck and call, and we truly don't necessarily understand Olokun. Some people will say, hey, it's for health, it's for prosperity, and you hear all these beautiful things, but we truly don't necessarily know what that means. Hi, Boy Abucheche, good to see you on. So Olokun governs a couple of things, right? And if you take anything out of this, this is the things that I want you to take. Olokun is going to govern the hidden and the lasting wealth. And when we talk about wealth, it's not all about money, right? When we talk about wealth, we're talking about family, we're talking about luck, we're talking about blessings, we're talking about stability, health, we're talking the whole 9 yards. Wealth is what you make it. Maybe you value your children more than anything else. Maybe you value your fortune. But it's that hidden and lasting wealth that Olokun is going to bring out that complements, listen to this, that complements, like I've said in several other videos leading up to this one, right? It leads to tell you that your ita that you received in your hand of Ifá, right? The ita or the sign, depending on the Olokun you receive, that advice is going to complement your hand of Ifá. So that hidden and that lasting wealth is important to understand how all that comes together. Mental and emotional balance. Have you ever wondered that how come when we sink to the bottom of the ocean, places that humans cannot even get to, machinery can't even get to because the pressure will begin to collide and begin to build a pressure that can destroy things. But yet we have living life form, fishes, and all types of aquatic animals that live underneath the depths of the ocean. Because that is that mental and emotional state that we have to understand that Olokun also brings to the table. That is necessary to understand as well. This is another reason why that Olokun and Ifá and Olokun of Ocha, we begin to see not necessarily disparities, but they're the same. But one is going to begin to bring you more in-depth information in order for you to understand how does that balance work for me. Right? Because if there's mental and emotional balance that is necessary, and if your hand of Ifá is going to align your Odi, we got to begin to collide the information in order to bring you that balance. This is the reason why Olokun and Ocha is important to understand those stepping stones, because maybe that's all you need in life. But then maybe you realize soon that actually Olokun of Ifá, we need to dig deeper into who you are, and we need to receive the Olokun of Ifá. Some people ask, hey, should I receive Olokun of Ifá and just get it done with and just go all in on that so I can get the deep secrets and get it done? I would say be careful. Be careful. I always warn that Olokun of Ifá is very much something that's very powerful, but that can save your life in the future, right? Olokun of Ocha is a stepping stone to Olokun of Ifá, right? And in some people's cases, maybe you don't need Olokun of Ifá ever, and that's okay, right? That's okay. Doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It's just that there's everything is guided by that hand of Ifá that you receive in that Odu, right? And we got to better understand that. We got to better understand who's your guardian Orisha, who's guiding you. All those things are things that you have to have those conversations with that Bawalao, the person who gave you hand of Ifa, to see what is truly beneficial for you. All right. Now, the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth. Olokun governs these realms, right? And a lot of people don't understand why. And I'm here to tell you. Olokun, right, and Ogun are two of the Iremoles. That means that they're celestial beings that came down into this world to give an essence in order to ensure that the human evolution continues. They're not just a worldly beings, and they're just not here just for the humans that live in this world and this earth. No, Olokun knows way more than that. Olokun is way more primordial than that. Olokun is celestial and one of God's direct creations. So this goes to show you that there's a difference between Iremole and Orisha. So Olokun, in essence, has many mysteries that needs to be unlocked. And those are things that Olokun unlocks for you through his advice. Then we talk about the unseen force, right, that shapes destiny. In many of the Yoruba cosmology texts, history, we understand that Olokun had his first shot at helping to create this world. Olokun tried to help populate this world. Olokun tried to make this world what it needs to be in order to ensure, right, that humans can evolve. Unfortunately for Olokun, right, he was not successful in this journey, right? And the Yoruba text talks about that, right? Ogun was not successful. It was Orunmila that was successful, right? And that's a story for a different time. But the reason why now you notice that Olokun being the first entity to come to this world to help populate it, we understand now why 3/4 of the earth is what belongs to Olokun. It's water, right? And it kind of makes you think, and you got to honestly kind of put that together. And then you look at the next half of that, it was all wilderness, Ogun, the warrior, hunting, going through those processes. And we know through many different levels of study that in Ogunda de Amasa, Ogunda Osa, right, Ochosi comes in to help complement Ogun. And now we have the full spectrum of what is being received, right? And now, so we see 3/4 of the world water, we see 1/4 because of is land. And then we begin to see Orunmila, who says, oh, hey, I figured out how to populate. I'm going to be the reconstructor, the destiny. I understand that. When Olodumare was creating it all, I was witness, I was the Elere being, right? You start to kind of see how this all comes together. Hopefully, this is helpful as you guys kind of help populate this thought process. Right, so in Iyobe, right, we understand that Olokun holds the hidden wealth right below the surface. Right, in today's understanding, the modern sense, this is the unseen foundation of a stable life. And why would I not give that to you as a foundation coming into this faith if I know that that's going to bring you that stable life that you're looking for? Now, stability again is very subjective. Stability to some is one thing, to another is somebody else, but Olokun nonetheless is something needed for you. So what's the Olokun significance? Let's drive that. Let's drive that a little further. Right? In Obeyono, right? I talked about the 3/4. of the earth belongs to Olokun. We understand that because Obeyono told us that. Or you can just look at modern science, and we have enough technology today that I can see it from outer space, and you can see and you can say, wow. In Irosun Ofun, we understand that Olokun stabilizes not just the home, but also stabilizes the mind. In Ogunda Owani, right, we understand that Olokun, must be received in order to anchor Ori. And we kind of talked about this a little bit. Matter of fact, I talked about it in my podcast that I posted an episode today on the podcast, and it was reinforcing that very thing, that your Ori has a pack with your guardian Orisha, has a pack with Eshu, has a pack with a lot of different celestial beings. And because of it, we have to better understand that we have to ensure that we are meeting those marks to reinforce ourselves. I find myself talking about this analogy that when you enter this faith, you got to look at yourself like a knight, right? And as a knight fighting battles, you got armor, you got a sword, you got a shield, you got all these different plates on. And these foundational things like Olokun becomes one of those plates to help you. And Ogunda Owani reinforces that analogy. It's not me saying it, right? It's Odu Ifá that says it. I like it. We got a lot of views coming through. I love it. Hey, so let's look at some modern examples, right? Look at today's world, right? 24-hour bad news cycle. Okay. You turn on the TV, and I would love to understand how come we speak more about tragedy than we do about good news. These are just modern examples. Social media culture, right? Why is it that there's so much misinformation and people are so drawn in to scrolling and to posting and to even you tuning into me? You got to be careful on what information is being passed. We talk about a time where we got a lot of conflicts going on around the world, whether it's India and Pakistan, Ukraine and Russia, Israel and the Gaza Strip. You talk about Iran, just heard some news clips on Iran recently. And you start to say, man, there's a lot of things going on in this world. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I haven't talked on the African region. I haven't necessarily talked on the Asian region too much. And you see the collapse of governments and the overthrown of governments, what's going on in Haiti. And you say, wow, there's a lot of things going on, which has caused a lot of constant financial stress in people's lives. So people are mentally and emotionally drowning in the shallow waters. Here's why I'm telling you this. You're probably wondering, hey, I thought we were talking about Olokun. We are. But people are emotionally and mentally drowning in shallow waters. Olokun gives you the depth, a place inside yourself, right? That storms cannot touch, begins to allow you to spread your wings, worry, focus on the things you need to focus. And that's what Olokun brings to the table. Remember what I said earlier. If there was anything you took out of this, you took this. Hidden and lasting wealth, mental and emotional balance. Because once you start to have that, and now you understand the other piece of that, the unseen forces, right, to shape destiny, now you understand who's Olokun. Right? Hey, little boy Bucheche David, good to see you on here. So now you understand where I'm getting at. A place for yourself that storms cannot touch is the essence of Olokun entering your life and you receiving Olokun. Okay. So when Odu's market, right? Eyobe, Obeyono, Ogundawani, Irosunika. Maybe there's a family history of mental instability. Maybe there's a loss of wealth. Maybe you're a child of Olokun. Maybe spiritually you're floating with no anchor. And maybe there's things that come out of spiritual misas. There are certain Oduns that speak heavily on Olokun. and talks about the essence of Olokun needed, right? I mention this because when Odu marks it, it's probably going to be the appropriate time for you to receive Olokun. When you have that guidance from your godparents, right? You receive Olokun. We talk about why you receive Olokun already, but now it's when you receive Olokun. We understand that Olokun is foundational. For me, I think everybody receives Olokun after their first year receiving Hand of Ifá. Your first year should be you studying your Ita, understanding your Ita, getting after your Ita, right? Understanding the essence of the faith, learning as much as you can in order for you to now tackle the next consecration, the next plate of armor you need to put on, because you need to understand that armor. You need to understand how it moves. You got to understand the thickness. You got to understand, is it going to weigh me down? You have to do this stuff strategically in order for you to be successful. So Olokun is very foundational in this sense, but has to be done at the right time. So now we start looking at it. Okay, I've seen clients, right, who have everything. Right? I'm talking about people who are rich, people who have tons of money, people who have a lot of power in government, a house, a career, whatever, right? But they're drowning in anxiety, depression, emotional chaos, right? And they receive Olokun. They serve him correctly. And within months, peace returns. The depth returns. They stop being thrown by every wave that hits them. That's Olokun. So we got to kind of dig a little deeper. We got to dig a little deeper. So then when we talk about things like Olokun, when we talk about things like Olokun and things that Olokun kind of offers us, for those of you who have Olokun already, right, a couple of different aspects of this I want you to always keep in the back of your mind, right? Olokun is the ocean, and like such, you always have to honor the ocean. Those of you who have received Olokun or are going to receive Olokun, always remember to respect the ocean. Don't ever go to the ocean after an essence or an energy has given you so much, and yet you've give nothing back in return. I like to think that energy is a two-way street to give and take, right? And that's something that you always got to remember. Never disrespect the water, right? Arrogance after wealth, right? You got to be careful with arrogance. You got to be careful about, getting the things that you get, right? Now, Olokun took care of you. You got the grounding in today's anxiety-filled world that I was trying to make a point of. Business stability, Olokun governs in commerce and in wealth. We understand this. Emotional depth. We understand that life is up and down, and so if life's up and downs don't destroy you, that emotional depth is vital. But what about the spiritual depth? Access to the ancient wisdom, that alignment where Ori is hanging on, or Olokun is hanging on to Ori and better building a better baseline of alignment for you. That is who Olokun is. In the world of social media, we talk about the flex culture, where people, chase fast money. You notice how, like, when you scroll, everybody's trying to make money. Hey, you can make $1,000 a day. Hey, I can make you a millionaire. Olokun teaches depth, patience, the real wealth. And wealth isn't just money, it's mental and emotional peace, at least in my mind. I don't know about you. If you think otherwise, put it in the chat. All right. So when your Odun says receive Olokun, there's a couple of things that I need you to understand. This is Ifá's way of understanding or telling you you gotta, one, in Ayobe, you gotta receive it early, because the stability becomes a problem. Because when you look at the Odun of Ayobe, it talks about the beginning of things. Well, what's the beginning of things? Well, we just talked about that, Olokun, right? The other thing that the Yobe talks about is organization, where we find ourselves isolating ourselves in the Odun of a Yobe. For those people who have a Yobe, we understand that there's a lot of stresses, right? Anxiety, right? There's an inability of kind of like an ADHD or not AD, well, probably ADD, and all these weird titles that people try to put on, but it's the mind's inability to have stability, right? And so then you see yourself in the Yobe, we gotta receive Olokun in order to help support that. And Ogundawani, then it's necessary for the Ori stability, right? And that's what some of these Oduns begin to highlight. And I'm just giving you a few examples. There's plenty of examples with plenty of Oduns that talk about what that means. Irosong Ofun anchors the family and the home, brings that peace not only to the person, but to the person's home, because that person's home is going to be very vital for them and their success to meet their destiny. Irosong Ofun, right? So those are things that I want you to kind of just have in the back of your mind as you begin to kind of figure out what those Olokun truly mean, right? So now, let's say you received Olokun. Now you're ready to receive Olokun. Now I have some better understanding of Olokun. Now, I want you, I'm trying to type to somebody that hit me up about this live right now, but But okay, so now let's say you received a locum or you're gonna receive a locum. That ita that a locum gives you, in a locum of ocha, they're gonna give you a sign. One delegung sign that needs to be casted in order to guide you the way Olokun wants to guide you in order to build the realm that he governs, right? Let's go through that governing again. Hidden and lasting wealth, mental and emotional balance, the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth, and the unseen force that shapes destiny, right? So we talk about that, right? And based on everything that we said, let's say now you're ready. You in a local vocha, you received your sign, you received your guidance, you received some advice, right? And you got told to do X, Y, and Z. Now you did it, and things are starting to get better, and you're getting excited, and everything is great. If you are an Olokun of Ifá recipient, or that is the path that you need to go, because that is the path that your Odun is guiding you through, and you got that from your Babalao in your hand of Ifá and a Boya. Now you have to listen to the Ita. The difference between listening to Olokun of Ocha and Olokun of Ita is that the Olokun of Ifá that brings an Ita is that that particular Ita is going to live with you, right? And it's no longer just advice and guidance. This is now something that becomes very trivial and becomes a cornerstone along with your hand of Ifá. Your hand of Ifá is still your foundational Odung in your Ita, but now your Olokun of Ifá is gonna be one of those strong pillars that's gonna hold up the house and the roof and everything that goes with it. So what am I trying to say here? Follow your ita. Follow the advice and guidance given to you in a local mobocha. Whichever one fits your bill, you need to be very conscious of what Olokun is telling you, because look how important Olokun is for you. James, boy bucheche, ache Olokun, boy bucheche awo. Hey, a lot of love to you, James. Thank you very much. Many blessings to you, my friend. So, so now let's go into this, right? We're going to talk about a couple of Odun. Odi Ogunda, Odi Ofun, and Odi Osa, coming from Odileke. If you haven't realized, these are my specialties, right? I like Odis, right? Because I have to study it because that's my parent Odun, Odileke, right? So in Odi Ogunda, talks a lot about neglecting offerings, right? When you neglect the offerings to a local, wealth becomes poisoned. Public shame in certain senses, right? Remember, wealth comes in different shapes and sizes. It's not all the same for everybody. So Nodio Gunda says, listen, if you're going to receive Olokun, understand the responsibilities that comes with it. right? And that's something Odi tells us. Now, Odi tells us that in a generic sense, so that means that goes to all the Orishas, right? But remember, the Orishas and the Eguns understand what's in your heart. They understand what's in your mind. They understand the consecrations received. They understand what's going on in life. So this is not to stress you out. This is not to kind of keep you on a robotic, way of life. No, this is to merely tell you that there is a responsibility that comes attached to this. Now, if you miss an offering or you miss something because you forgot or you got overwhelmed with work for one reason or another and you're still trying to work it out, the Orishas and the Eguns love you nonetheless, and there's no punishment here. Ifa doesn't believe in any of that. This is not the Abrahamic faiths that if you don't do this, you go to hell. If you don't do this, you're blasphemy. You know what I mean? No, that's not what this is about. But I am telling you that there's Oduns and Ifa that dictate certain things. Hey, little boy, Buchete, my genius. Much thanks to you, my brother. No, of course, thank you. Taishani, little boy, Moyo. Boy, hey, Moyo, I'm gonna have to talk to you one day. I gotta learn how to say that first part of your name. But many blessings to you, okay, and yours. So, Taishani, little boy, Bucheche. David, what if we're receiving both Ocha and Ifa? Does one Ita take precedence over another? David, what a great question. So, David, so a lot of times, depending on the route, the Odun that you receive in your hand of Ifa dictates, okay, hey, person's receiving an Olokun of Ifa, perfect, or somebody's receiving an Olokun of Ocha, perfect, right? Depending on what that route looks like, it's based on reinforcing that destiny that you have going forward. Right? The Olokun of Ocha is still a beautiful thing because it's a strong representation of Olokun from the terrestrial side, where Olokun of Ifá talks to you from a celestial side. Both of them play a special role. Olokun of Ifá is going to give you an Ita breakdown that's going to be able to complement your hand of Ifá Odun regardless, but it pairs it up very nicely, right? And it gives us so much insight, right, on the potential for the person, the destiny for the person. The Olokun of Ocha, right, is also very important and leads us into different fundamental realms of the terrestrial plane in order to better understand our connection with our eguns, our ancestors, how we need to walk, talk, kind of some of those taboo things, right? Gives us some great advice, right? And so a Olokun of Ocha is very much a good stepping stone for a terrestrial sense, where a Olokun of Ifá is more of a celestial sense. Both, at the end of the day, all priests and priestesses, I'm going to tell you right now, all end up with a Olokun of Ocha and a Olokun of Ifá. Because here's the thing with a Olokun of Ifá, and this isn't necessary. This excludes kind of the Babalaos, because in a Olokun of Ifá, you'll see a lot of priests and priestesses in the realm of Ocha or Orishas receive that Olokun of Ifá because it's theirs, can never be rebirthed. It is 100% going to maintain their stability, and that battery pack of that endless amount of energy is just flowing to them. So you always see them with both, right? So there's some strategy behind that. So both of them are going to complement your destiny and your path, right? But just in different perspectives, right? Where one is 100% mandate, where the other one is advice and guidance. But that advice and guidance is so vital to better understand how you move and maneuver in your workplace, in your family, in your relationships, right? So you'll see where both of them talk pretty much to a good extent. One is going to be focused more terrestrially, while the other one is more focused celestially. Hopefully that answers your question. Odiche Inire, a couple of dafas ago, is Olokun speak in that Odun or Obeka. All right, James, I'm gonna get to you, my brother. I'm gonna get to you. Talking the PMP soon, man. Olokun ride with me, Ache. Oh, taking the PMP soon. James, I don't know what that means, but Buro Boy, I'm glad you're taking it. Are you talking about only PMP I know is a project management program? Well, I don't know. Maybe you're talking something different. But no, Buro Boy, James, I owe you an answer, my friend. All right, let me get through this. Hey, another Odun that Odifun talks about I'm sorry, another Odu is Odu Ifá. In Odu Ifá, we talk about mental imbalance, madness, paranoia. We talk a lot about people that are fanatics, right? Um, and we go back and we reinforce that element that Olokun brings to the table, which is that balance between the mental stability of things. So we always got to remember that whenever we receive Olokun, we have the responsibility of honoring Olokun so that we can maintain that mental balance. In Odisha, we also talk about where business, and commerce is very important. This is the reason why a lot of times people associate Olokun with money and wealth, right? And business. And a lot of that has to do with Odiosa, which talks about where business and commerce flourishes under the umbrella of Olokun, right? But we got to be careful not to violate those taboos that fall under Olokun, because then we find ourselves in a position where when now all of a sudden, we don't understand why things are going south, but we receive this entity that manages some of these aspects. So we got to make sure we stick in this together, right? And some modern examples, right? Some things that I just want you guys to think about, and I've seen this sadly enough, right? People rush, they get Olokun because they hear he could bring money. Then they neglect them. They stop attending him. They break taboos. And then within a year, they got financial problems, mental breakdowns, family splits up, and reversal of fortune. Why do I tell you that? Because Olokun comes with responsibilities, right? And you got to always understand that. The ocean always collects its debts, right? And Odi, and the Odi family of Odù, right, warns us. Olokun must be respected as a living relationship, not just as a status or a statue or something that's collecting dust. Or no, 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 no. You got to make sure we understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. Okay. So a lot of goodness there. Hey, Buddha boy, bucheche. Ah, claro. Thank you, David. All right, James. All right. So good. So so do me a favor, James, if you can type on here. So you receive Odioshe Inire a couple of dafas ago, right? So when you say a couple of dafas ago, for everybody else that's on here, right? You got Dapale and Dafa. Dafa is weighing keenness. So and James, correct me if I'm wrong, you went to an Isheshe priest that did a Dafa. He consulted with kings, right? And you came out with Odioshe and he did, right? So then you want to know if Odioshe, right, a couple of dafas ago, right? So that everybody has clarity on your question as they see it, right? If that speaks on Olokun, right? Am I give me a thumbs up so I can understand, just a little bit if I'm reading this correctly, because I don't want to give you the wrong advice. Right. And again, as a Bawalao and the Lokumi faith, I'm very respectful of my Isha brothers and sisters. My bad, brother. Or shit or D. But yes. Okay. No, no, no. That's perfect. So some of the things that you gotta look at when you look at, let's say Oshel D, or let's say Obeka, right? In relation to Olokun, right? Let's dig into this a little bit, because I think everybody can benefit. I think everybody will benefit, right? If I talk about Oshedi for a little bit, right? Okay, I'll talk about Oshedi. So in Oshedi, some of the big things that I think that we need to kind of analyze in Oshedi. Oshedi speaks a lot about the luck, right? That comes after the three storms. Oshedi to me in Ifa, corpus of things, talks about dissatisfaction, right? It talks about where we're not happy in certain lengths of our lives and we're trying to find that happiness. But before we can get to that happiness, we got to be able to kind of see, and we got to go through some turmoil, right? Those waves that crash, right? And that's where the luck that comes after the three storms comes from. In accordance to in accordance to Ifá or Shadi, we see Olokun explicitly referenced, right, in certain, incantations or orikis, right? When we talk about Okoa di Fafun Orunmila, Oni bara eregun Ifá nire, Ifá kafarafun yalolde ati Olokun, right? And we see this as Olokun is seen kind of like a guardian of the secrets in this Odu. We see that, Olokun per se is going to be the one that's going to begin to bring that satisfaction back into your life. When I see Oshedi, I see that I have to be very cautious of the Obinis, the females in my life, right? In my inner circles, my daughters, my spouse, whatever that looks like, right? My mother, my grandmother, right? Those people that are closest to us, and we got to make sure that we're honoring them, right? And Olokun is going to be that catalyst that pushes you towards that, right? You got to maintain an ancestral obligation, right? So the Egun got to be attended, and the deep water obligation as well, which is Olokun. So Olokun absolutely has a lot to do with this particular Odun, and we got to be able to understand that going in. The other thing that I really want to kind of make sure that we understand when it comes to Olokun, in Oshedi. In Oshedi, there's a lot of moral aspects to this particular Odu. When I think about Olokun, this is the reason why I gotta think hard. When we talk about Oshedi and we want to relate it to a specific Orisha, we gotta really put some thought behind it, right? If you don't honor the ancestors in Olokun, imbalance occurs. So I think one of the primary advices in there, in that particular dafa that you receive, you want to make sure you're focused on that. You want to respect, for the deep, which is Olokun, and you want to have respect for the eguns, right, that are linked in this Odun, right? The deep and the dead are linked, right? And so in Oshedi, Olokun acts kind of like an undercurrent obligation, an undercurrent guardian, right? Supporting those who honor their lineages and keeps the hidden wealth and knowledge aligned. Right? Failure to honor both Olokun and the Eguns, right? They lead to instability in a person's life and spiritual path. Right. So then now I look at Obeka. And as I begin to try to give you Obeka without trying to break down Oduns too much, I'm gonna just paraphrase here, okay? And Obeka, while Olokun is not explicitly marked, right? In Obeka, right? He's not marked as a central, divinity. There are certain divinities or orishas that are marked in certain odus that speak, but it becomes critical in cases where the person is under a spiritual attack, brujeria and whatnot, right? Loss of fortune, right? Dangers of a sobo of being lost or things being lost, right? The humility, right? Teachings in this Odu of Obeka, right, aligns with Olokun's expectations, right, of respect and non-arrogance that comes after wealth, right? So we got to kind of look at that into that perspective as well. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. James, both Oduns can relate, right, to Olokun. Particularly Obeka is not really central to Olokun. When I look at Oshedi, I see more relations, right, with the local, right? But just to kind of give you some perspective there. Okay. All right, guys. I'm checking the chats. I don't think I see anything extra on there. Everything looks good. All right, guys. All right. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things now. I want to make sure I bring up just a few things. I want to talk to you about a pataki, right? No video is good without a pataki, right? Okay. So, we're going to talk about this pataki that, when Olodumare gave the order, right, for Osa, which is the river, Ose, which is the lagoon, and Olokun, the sea, to descend to the earth, right? They first consulted Ifá to ensure that their journey was going to be successful, right? So each went to their Babala. Osa went to Osasa. Oshe went to Osheshe, right? Olokun went to Akbeg. Of the three, right? Olokun's Ebo was the largest and the most complex because the sea's power, was going to be vast and it needed the proper balance to avoid disaster, right? So once they completed their sacrifices, they descended, right? And Ifa said, each found great prosperity. Osa, again the river, became the mother of life flowing across the earth. Ose, which was the lagoon, grew and overflowed, prospering, right, to this day when it rains, right? We see that today. Olokun, the sea, became the most powerful and prosperous of all, covering three-fourths of the planet. The rivers and the rain fed Olokun, and in turn, Olokun holds the deepest wealth of the world, the material, the spiritual, and the ancestral. Realizing the greatness of his power, Olokun chose to honor Orunmila, showering him, right, with riches and commanding that his children always bow to Ifa and maintain the proper respect. That's why to this day, Olokun sings and dances in joy, right? And we see this particular pataki in our literature, in the Yoruba cosmology of things, right? And what this pataki was trying to, communicate was that, no power or wealth, right, is complete without the humility before wisdom. This is the reason why we have to be careful about analyzing and seeing Olokun as a person bowing down or something to Orunmila. No, you're seeing the power, the wealth, and the and the vast spirituality coming together with wisdom, which is Orunmila. Olokun's true prosperity came after honoring wisdom, because although you are powerful, although you may have it all, if you don't have the wisdom to lead and the wisdom to take care of oneself, then what do you have? Right? So you got to be careful with that pride. To receive Olokun without maintaining respect for Ifa and one's Ita is to invite imbalance. And that's what that pataki is truly trying to bring to you. That is what that pataki is truly trying to say to you. This is the reason why we got to understand what we receive and how we're receiving it, when we are receiving it. And that's the most important piece. James, oh my gosh, James, thank you very much for that. Little boy Abu Cheche, may he follow local and only abundantly shower. Hey, thank you very much for that. That meant a lot to me. Thank you. And that's going to a good cause. Just in case anybody wants to know. Again, that goes to the nonprofit. The nonprofit flips it, and we get to honor people who need to receive Mano de Orula, Hand of Ifá, Warriors, right? And maybe they don't have it. Maybe they grew up like me. We grow up in poverty, and we have to make and find those ways to our community. Little boy, thanks for that, James. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so now I want to just talk on a couple of other things, right? One, Olokun, we understand that we honor Olokun with certain attributes. Olokun, we talked about the abyss, we talked about deep ocean, we talked about the unseen wealth, stability, ancient wisdom. Very much associated with the depths, the hidden knowledge, the prosperity, the mental, emotional stability, and ancestral mysteries. We understand that it spans three-fourths of the earth, right? You guys got that, right? You guys are honed in. You understand Olokun to a certain point. Now we understand that Olokun, right, is slightly different, right? When we talk about Olokun, Ovocha, and Ifa, on how we care for it. One has water, one doesn't have water. Olokun's Olokun, it doesn't change a thing. It's different paths of Olokun and how Olokun manifested into this world and when he didn't. And those are the two differences of Olokun. In the Olokun of Ifá, we honor Olokun with the number 9. In Olokun of Ocha, we honor Olokun with the number 7. Right? We understand that Olokun representing the mysterious and the veiled nature of Olokun. We understand that Olokun has a lot to do with mask. That's why you're going to see a lot of associations with masquerades, Olokun, etc., because it talks a lot about that in Olokun. We understand that Olokun, for a certain point, and I'll show you here, Olokun, Olokun's beads are very specific, right? Typically, we see that his beads represent, the blue, the white beads representing the deep seas. But unlike Yemaya, there is different aspects to his beads. You're gonna see where he has green, red, a light blue to a dark blue and to a clear. We show the relationship of Yemaya with Olokun because Yemaya is the surface level of the sea, right? Yemaya was almost like a secretary concept, right, to Olokun, right? And this is the reason why you start to see a different color beads of Olokun. We talk about the sea foam. Sea foam is very interesting. It's one of the attributes and symbols of Olokun, right? And it's associated with purification, spiritual transformation, and that's always important. When we talk about offerings to Olokun, we talk a lot about making sure that we give Olokun back what goes into the ocean. So you see where we get Iyatutu, which is fresh fish. We like to give him water type adimuses, watermelons, pineapples, papayas, grapes, pears, apples, oranges, right? Um, we talk a lot about the concepts of taking pork rinds, right, and making sure that we cook some pork rinds and we place it for him because we talk about the pataki of Yemaya and the pig, right, and where they had to shave the pig, and we'll jump into that pataki when we talk about Yemaya at some point. But this is the reason why we give pork rinds to Olokun, right? And then we talk a lot about making sure that we understand Olokun's essence, right? And we talked about that essence of wealth, the unseen, the spirituality. We talked about his colors already. We talked about some of the taboos, which is don't disrespect the waters or the marine life. Arrogance after receiving wealth, you'll be in trouble. Neglecting offerings, after receiving Olokun is bad. Certain land-based herbs have to be avoided when mixing with Olokun's offerings, but that's more for priests and priestesses to understand the herbs of Olokun. So we got to be careful with that. Off the top of my head, when we talk about, let's talk about like even the domains, right? Um, we talk about a lot of the hidden wealth. We talk about the mental. We talked about the mental emotional imbalance. We talk about the fertility, which is also very important for Olokun because Olokun being the water, water is life. And when we talk about Olokun and we talk about Olokun and how he's formed, especially specifically in Olokun of Ifá, we see it like in this clay vase that's supposed to be very representation of a woman that's pregnant, right? And in that woman's, belly, right, in the placenta, we talk about a ball of water and the life that's swimming in there, right? Very representative to this world, very representative to the ocean, right? Until that water breaks, right? And then we have life that is being given. So fertility is very important when it comes to Olokun and what Olokun can grant to best help you, both physical and a creative sense, right? Connecting to one's ancestral depth, many Egun connection through Olokun's domains. That's very important. Sudden death and health issues. This is why I always tell people go through a transitional period. Olokun Ovocha is very important, gives you great advice, allows you to terrestrially know how to walk. But there's going to be those times when something really bad happens, and we're going to need the power of Olokun and Ifá celestially in order to kind of maybe help revive us from maybe sudden death, or something that's terrible is coming, or maybe we're sick in the hospital, and we got to be able to do these things, right? And that's important. Stabilize the home and the community. We talked about that with Irosun Fung. Some of the relationships with the other Orishas, we understand that Olokun was very close to Yewa. They both live in the deep sea. In many patakis, yewa, you understand, goes into certain depths in order to avoid some shame in certain patakis. We could talk about yewa some other time. Intertwined with yemaya, we definitely understand yemaya being the surface, Olokun being the deep. We talk about linked with Ogun and Osain, right? Both offered, right, Olokun's daughter, leading to a famous reconciliation, right? Um, and I was gonna say the Pataki, but I see we're already running about to get to an hour, and I don't want to do that. But just understand there's a strong link between Ogun and Osai, right? They both offended Olokun's daughter at a certain point in time, leading to kind of a famous reconciliation where Olokun was going to destroy some things. Olokun's wrath can be very temperamental, but there is a pact between Olokun, Ogun, Osai, which is very beautiful. Orisha Oku is another pack where the earth is the counterpart to the sea. There's water and earth, and that's where we begin to kind of see Orisha Oku, Olokun being the sea-based, wealth. We talk about Orisha Oku being the land-based and wealth, right? Both of those divinities are pretty interconnected nonetheless. Again, a lot of great things about receiving Olokun. Normally, it's received after you receive your hand of Ifá. Typically, there are some variances there where maybe people have to receive a little sooner because of other different reasons, which is perfectly okay. Typically, I like to see it received after you receive your hand of Ifá, then you receive your Olokun, your spiritual misas, you get yourself together, but you have to understand your Ifá. Especially when there's certain oduns that show instability or mental imbalance. Olokun is very much important and needs to be received. For the children of Olokun, okay, children of Olokun, I recommend you receive your Olokun of Ifá first because you need to understand the depths of your celestial, right, court. And then you receive your Olokun of Ocha so you can better understand terrestrially how some things are flowing, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. But children of Olokun are probably one of those exceptions for sure. Um, for those of you who work near or on water, fishermen, people who like to work at sea, oil rigs or anything like that, receive a locum. You need all the help you can get because the sea can be very unforgiving, right? For those whose lives need that emotional and that financial grounding, right? Not that a locum is going to open up the floodgates and you're going to be rich. No, but maybe you're having some struggles in that, one step forward, two steps back, right? Or maybe you find yourself in this emotional imbalance and maybe the doctors are trying to drug you up with different types of pills for anxiety or whatnot, right? Or locum will be really good for you because it helps balance you out. Right? So, in summary, right? Locum is not simply just an extra Orisha to put under your belt. It's a stabilizing force. In today's chaotic world, mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial stability is important, right? When received and maintained properly, Olokun is going to protect you. It's going to ground the life of the devotees. I promise you that. When neglected, the Oduns already warned us. Severe consequences, madness, loss, disgrace, reversal of fortune, possibly. Right? So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about Olokun nonetheless. Right? Again, I am here to answer any questions. I'm looking at the chat. I don't think I see anything in the chat that needs to be answered unless I'm wrong. But nonetheless, I think I answered David's question. I answered James' question. I don't see anybody else. So with that, hey, Olokun is the depth we need in an unstable world. And unfortunately, we live in a world that has a lot of chaos. To receive Olokun is to root your life where the storms cannot shake you. To neglect Olokun is to risk losing some very stable and different aspects of stability that you're seeking, right? If your Odun calls for Olokun, or if your life is showing those signs, reach out. You know what I mean? Whether it's me or, now again, if you have a godfather, you got a Babalao, stick to that. That's your lineage. But if you find yourself solo dolo, you find yourself alone and unafraid, just reach out. You guys got my emails. It's in the description. Everything's in there. Okay. And that way we can do this the right way in alignment with Odun and tradition. All right. So with that said, we're going to begin to continue to build on these foundational Orishas, and we're going to begin to ensure that those roads kind of continue to map each other out. And with that said, Iburu Iboya Bucheche, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Again, there's going to be a lot of content on the membership side of the house, right? And then I will continue with the Odu Ifá versions coming this weekend, and we're gonna continue to deep and dive back in. So hey, with that said, as a Pisces, I finally rock with Olokun. Salute to the combo. James, I feel you, brother. Does Olokun speak on Obara Otrupon? If Olokun comes out as your guardian Orisha, would you recommend to receive him before your year is up? Oof, I got questions now. I was trying to log off and you guys threw me questions. So Obara Otrupon. Let's talk about Obara Otrupon. Let me answer this question real quick. Obara Otrupon. All right, I need to kind of write these down after receiving your hand of Ifá. All right, thank you, Baba, and good night to everybody. Moyo, they kept me on. Moyo, you see what they did to me? I was about to log off and they kept me here. So let me see something here. All right, so I got my questions down. All right, all right. All right, so first things first, let's talk about Obara Otrupon. In Obara Otrupon, I think the very first thing that sticks out to me in Obara Otrupon is the concepts of the intelligence of Obatala. Right, so in Obara Otrupon, we see the essence of Oya, Ogun, Obatala, Eshu, right? Not to say that Olokun is not in Obara Otrupon, but on Obara Otrupon, we have a very strong relationship with Olokun. Still, like the other Doduns, not necessarily, I think it was Obeka that we talked about earlier, not necessarily center, right, um to the Odun, but it does talk about some things because we talk about Yemaya, going to visit Obatala in this sign. We talk a lot about where Ogun, claiming um that she is no, what was it in Bataki? It had a lot to do with the wrath for the daughter of Olokun, right? Absolutely, and it started a conflict with Ogun. When we talk about Olokun and Obara Otrupon, we talk a lot about, yeah, it's more the Patakis of Yemaya and the daughter of Olokun, right? Who was killed after a dispute involving Obara, Obadala, Ogun. There's some goodness there in Obara Otrupon. But here's the relationship that I really want you to focus on, right? Yes, Olokun is mentioned, but it's more on the respect for the female lineage and the sea. The power of the deep, must be appeased. Born, the customs of honoring our eguns and Olokun simultaneously is very important. Obara Otrupon is actually one of those signs where I would tell the person they need to receive Olokun of Ifá because, in this particular sign, we talk about chanting for Ogun, for Egun, and for the Olokun, right, to maintain balance. And in the Olokun of Ifá, there's a strong connection in that kalga and that charge that we create in that Olokun of Ifá that creates an essence of a connection with Egun, right? Unlike the Olokun of Osha. Again, nothing wrong with Olokun Osha. It's just how the Olokun of Ifá is mounted. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's see what else we got here. If a Olokun comes out of your guardian Orisha, do you recommend to receive him? Hey, Paul, to answer that question, um, so yes, if you are a child of Olokun, I am 100% gonna say you need to hear what your father, I will say your father, your guardian Orisha, right? Your Orisha Abatori has to say about you. That is the very essence of a conversation that needs to be had with your guardian Orisha that a lot of other people can't do, right? But you can do through Ifá. receiving Olokun of Ifá. That's an Ita that's worth receiving, nonetheless. All right, let's see. Yes, after receiving your Ifá. Absolutely, because only after you receive your Ifá do you understand who's your guardian Orisha. Hey, Norman Ray, thank you very much for that. That is phenomenal. Thank you for that. Again, beautiful things come with this, and I'm gonna constantly give you guys shout outs because you guys are phenomenal, and I truly appreciate all the donations. That is great. But okay, hey, if there's no other questions, I think I will leave it there unless anybody else has any other save rounds, like we like to say in the military. Bah, you got any save rounds in the chamber? All right. Because there's a lag between the YouTube studio and my live when I'm, casting through Zoom, I'm gonna give it a second. And I may look crazy because I'm just gonna stand here awkwardly, but I just want to make sure I don't miss anybody and nobody else misses something that can benefit them because of somebody else's question. Thank you for this video, Padrino. Y buru boya bucheche mafara fumo lokum. Ni buru y boya y bucheche. That is beautiful. Thank you very much, David. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Let's see what else we got. Boom. What does a local have to do with Odun Irosumushe? Eric. Eric. Eric, I seen you before on here. And Eric, are you the same Eric that I know from back in the day? If you are, there's no pressure, my friend. There's no pressure there. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. And I'm glad you caught me because I was like, oh, okay, I think we're almost done here. But Irosunche. So when we talk about Irosunche, a couple of things stick out to me, right? Is that Irosunche talks about where the guardian Orisha needs to be understood, it needs to be honored, and so does the packs. So my question to you, and Irosunche, right? And a lot of times people don't get confused with consultations, right? That only lasts a short period of time versus your hand of Ifá, which is your life sign and your guardian Orisha. So my question and my follow-up question is going to be, Eric, who's your guardian Orisha? Because here is where Orunmila mediates in Irosunche between the Orisha and the person, right? It has to bring all those packs together in order to bring some form of fundamental understanding to the person's life so they better understand their path. So, Eric, give me the answer. Who is your Orisha Batori? That's going to be the $1,000,000 question of the day. Chango, Iburu Boya, Ibucheche. Okay, so let's dissect this a little bit, shall we? So in Irosunshe, we talk a lot about, and I'm glad because Chango speaks in this, Agayu speaks in this, Eshu, Olodumari, Eleda. We talk a lot about, where the person is on fire or in hot water. You probably heard, or maybe your elders have said that. You're caliente, you're boiling, you got to be careful. And we talk a lot about where the person begins to fall into some mishaps in prosperity and money, mismanagement. Maybe you had a run-in with something that just didn't work out. Maybe it was a business dealing, maybe it was a startup, maybe it could be anything, right? But it announces, and it also in Che, especially with Chango, we talk a lot about the aspects of the forest fire. We talk a lot about the hotness. We talk a lot about, temperaments and what cools down temperaments, right? When a fire goes on in your house, what do? You call the fire department. What do they use? They use foam, right? We talk about the foam that foams up in the ocean, right? And when it hits the shoreline, we talk about the water, that's the base of that retardant, right? That is in that the firefighters, hose. So Olokun has a lot to do with Irosonche, but it's based on Orumina's mediation with Olokun and the guardian Orisha Chango. That's the reason why I asked you. No, not to mention that, in Irosonche, you got to be careful with the women's that are pregnant, right? With women that are pregnant in your lives, in your inner circle, your immediate family, right? Mother, sister, your spouse, and making sure that you receive Olokun for their blessings, because you got to put offerings to Olokun to ensure that all the blessings happen for your daughters, your wife, your whatever, you know what I mean? In that sense, your mother, etc. Okay, let's see. Did I get everybody? Super appreciation. Thanks, James. You're my hero, brother. Thank you, buddy. No, but boy, chair. All right, boom. All right, guys. Hey, I think I answered everything. I think I answered everything. And we stood in here for a good, how long we on this thing? Hour and 10 minutes. Jeez. An hour. Well, I see an hour and 10 minutes and 30 seconds on my screen right now. Um, but it's weird because I can see myself in the future. But okay. All right, I think we hit it in the head, man. I think we hit it in the head, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I appreciate all these donations, man. You guys rocked it. You guys rocked it, man. Hell yeah, appreciate that. All right, you guys want me to stick around? You want me to stick around? Let's see. You gotta let me know. All right, I think I better go to bed soon. Oh, Shaman '05 line. Hey, what's Ochung's relationship with Olokun? Well, we just kind of talked about that in the Pataki, right? And when we talked about it, what was the first thing that I mentioned, right? And here's something I kind of always remember. Ochung's relationship with Olokun, when we look at it in a scientific sense, right? We look at this the fact that the rivers run into the ocean, right? And when we talk about that, we talk about where the rivers have a lot to do with the fertility. Rivers can cross all types of land where the oceans don't necessarily touch. Ochun is that balance that a local needs in order to ensure that the ocean's wealth hits all aspects of life. Right now, let's look at this from a cosmological relationship. Right, the sea Olokun was the fourth spirit that was formed, right? That formed nature. The river, and you got me here thinking, I'm racking my brain right now, right? The river um, depends on the sea, and the mother of the river is the ocean, right? So that's just a cosmological, right? Terrestrial type relationship when you talk about Ochung River or Olokun Sea. So it was Olokun who sent, right, the sardines, the sands, and the shells to the river and allowed the river to have a bed and form life. Right? This is the reason why you see certain sea bass and then you see freshwater bass. The mixing of the sea and the river, is comes from a formation of life. Just looking at it from again, a scientific perspective. Now, let's go in and dig a little deeper. Let's dig a little deeper. When you talk about the ritual connection, Ochung is honored in rituals, in river sand and shells and elements that are also tied to Olokun. In Ochung Ibu Yimu, right? This is the Ochung path, right, with the deep sea connection. Um, and you could probably do some research online about Ochung Ibu Yimu, which is Iyumu. Ochung Iyumu, right? And this is the Ochun that lives in the bush, the river, and under the Imo Oshun bush. That is also tied to the deep water mysteries, right? And I know I'm talking crazy right now because to understand Ochun is to understand a lot of different layers, right? So I'm trying to give you this overarching. In addition, not just that path of Ochun, we talk about that. Matter of fact, that path of Ochun is also the deep current of Ochun that's connected to Olokun and Yemaya. This is the relationship of Yemaya and Ochun that talks about their sisterhood, right? Marked in the in that Odu with an injunction, right, to feed the sea. But anyway, as you kind of keep going forward, right, you kind of just see that, Ochun and Olokun are interconnected and interweave nonetheless. Right. There's a lot of mystery there to Ochun, but we have to break down all the paths of Ochun. But I think that was a very valid question. But hopefully I was able to satisfy that a little bit, Shaman, for sure. Ochun's relationship with Olokun, right? It's there. It's 100%. River goes into ocean. Ochun and Yemaya. Yemaya is tied to Olokun. And there you begin to kind of see how you can peel that back and get something, and you can truly explain and understand that relationship with Ochun. Plus Olokun's relationship teaches us how Ochun governs the surface life, how the sea brought the life into the river, and how they work together and jointly. And that's captured in Odu Ifá. Okay. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Okay. Hey guys. All right. You guys did great. I'm so excited. You guys are my heroes. I'm glad I was able to part some wisdom today. Hopefully you guys took something from this. Again, you guys know how to reach me. Everything is on the description block. And with that said, you guys have a great night. All right. Iburu, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody from Cyberland. Shafir Bawalao checking out. All right. Have a great night, guys.